As days passed, Sarah's role evolved beyond just scientist. The medical team worked to stabilize the adult Craxi, who they learned was named Kirixax, a prominent warrior scholar fleeing from something they couldn't yet understand. Meanwhile, the juvenile, who Sarah had begun calling Nova, due to the star-like patterns in its scales when calm, became her constant companion. The station's crew watched in amazement as Sarah established routines that seemed impossible. She converted one of the research labs into a temporary living space, incorporating elements that would make a young Craxi feel secure: high perches, warm basking spots, and plenty of space for their natural climbing instincts. "You're either the bravest or craziest human I've ever met," Dr. Marcus Wong, the station's chief medical officer, told her one evening. They were watching Nova methodically solve a complex puzzle toy Sarah had designed to keep the young Craxi's mind engaged. "Do you know what most species do when they encounter Craxi young? Run the other way." Sarah smiled, noting how Nova's scales rippled with pride as another section of the puzzle clicked into place. "Exactly. Yet here you are, treating one of the galaxy's most dangerous predator species like it's a gifted child in need of enrichment activities." Sarah watched as Nova used both primary and secondary appendages to manipulate the puzzle's components, showing remarkable problem-solving skills. "That's exactly what Nova is, Marcus. Being dangerous and being a child aren't mutually exclusive. Someone needs to care. And right now, we're all they have." The real breakthrough came 3 weeks into their unexpected arrangement. Kirixax finally regained consciousness, and the station braced for what they assumed would be an aggressive response to finding their child in human care. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented. Nova, hearing that their guardian was awake, practically dragged Sarah to the medical bay, scales blazing with excitement. The adult Craxi's initial reaction was exactly what you'd expect: frills flaring in warning, body tensing for protection. But then Nova did something that made every witness freeze. The young Craxi positioned itself between its guardian and Sarah in a protective stance. The message was clear across any species barrier. Nova wasn't just accepting human care, but had formed a genuine bond of trust. Kirixax's aggressive posture melted away, replaced by something that the universal translators would later struggle to convey: a mix of gratitude, respect, and profound relief. "You have cared for my child." Kirixax's translated voice filled the medical bay, when most would have seen only threat and danger. The Craxi do not forget such debts. As Sarah would later learn, this moment would ripple far beyond their small station. The Craxi, it turned out, were facing a crisis that threatened their youngest generation, and they had been searching the galaxy for allies who could help protect their future. In Sarah and humanity, they found something unexpected: a species whose capacity for care transcended their natural fears. The day ended with Sarah making notes in her research log, trying to capture the significance of what was unfolding. Nova had fallen asleep nearby, scales glowing softly with peaceful colors. She couldn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of humanity's new role in the galaxy, not as conquerors or mere traders, but as trusted guardians of the future across all species barriers. Sometimes, she wrote in her final log entry that night, the most important scientific discoveries aren't about new technologies or distant stars. Sometimes, they're about finding new ways to care for each other, even across the vast distances between our worlds. News travels fast in space, especially when it involves the notoriously private Craxi species. Within weeks of Kirixax's recovery, the Horizon Deep Space Research Station found itself at the center of unprecedented attention. It wasn't just about one Craxi child anymore. They were about to become part of something much bigger. Sarah Chen's morning routine had already adapted to include Nova's presence when the first request arrived. A delegation of Craxi elders, their massive frames barely fitting in the station's conference room, presented their case with uncharacteristic humility. "Our creches are under threat," the lead elder, Vazak, explained. Their scales shifted in patterns that the station's AI identified as deep concern. A genetic mutation is affecting our ability to care for our young during crucial development stages. Our warriors become unstable near the affected ones. Sarah felt Nova press against her leg, sensing the tension in the room. The young Craxie had grown considerably in the past weeks, but still sought her presence during uncertain moments. "And you think humans could help?" she asked, already suspecting where this was heading. "We have observed," Vazak continued, "that humans possess a unique neurological stability around our young. Your species doesn't trigger the aggressive responses that even our own people are experiencing. We need caretakers." The station's commander, Diana Martinez, leaned forward in her chair. "You're asking us to turn a research station into a nursery for Craxie children." "We are asking," another elder interjected, "for humanity's help in saving our species." What followed was a transformation that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The Horizon Station, once dedicated to studying distant stars, began adapting to its new role. Research labs were converted into specialized care areas, and more human specialists were brought in from Earth. Sarah found herself heading the program, teaching other humans how to interpret Craxie behavior and needs. "They're not just powerful warriors," she explained during a training session, demonstrating with Nova, who had become something of a teaching assistant. "They're highly intelligent, emotionally complex beings. Their young need mental stimulation as much as physical care." The challenges weren't just biological. Cultural barriers had to be navigated carefully. The Craxie, proud warriors for countless generations, struggled with the idea of entrusting their most vulnerable to another species. Yet, as more young ones arrived, the results spoke for themselves. Humans, it turned out, had a gift that went beyond mere caregiving. Their ability to treat each young Craxie as an individual, to adapt to their unique needs while maintaining firm boundaries, proved invaluable. The affected youngsters, who might have grown unstable under their own species' care, thrived under human guidance. "It's fascinating," Dr. Wong remarked one day, reviewing the medical data. "The same traits that made humans survive on Earth. Our adaptability, our pack-bonding instincts, even our predator response mechanisms, make us perfect for this role." The station's population grew to include not just Craxie young, but other species as well. Word had spread about the humans' unique abilities, and soon they had Vexry crystal forms, Meridian floaters, and even a clutch of notoriously particular Cynthian royal offspring under their care. Sarah often found herself in what they now call the observation dome, watching the unlikely family they'd created. Nova, now acting as a kind of older sibling to the newer arrivals, was teaching a group of younger Craxie how to properly solve puzzle cubes while the human supervisor watched nearby. "Did you ever imagine this?" Commander Martinez asked, joining her one evening. Below them, species that would normally never interact were playing together under human supervision. "Not in my wildest dreams," Sarah admitted. "We spent so long looking to the stars for new discoveries. Who knew we'd find our place in the galaxy by looking after its children?" The station's success led to more than just childcare innovations. The Craxie, grateful for humanity's help, began sharing their advanced technology. Other species, seeing the trust the warrior race placed in humans, started viewing Earth's people in a new light. The first warning came in the form of a scrambled transmission from a Craxie patrol vessel. Sarah was helping a group of youngsters with their daily exercises when Commander Martinez's voice came through the station-wide comm with an edge she'd never heard before. "All caregivers, initiate protocol sanctuary. This is not a drill." Sarah's heart raced, but her movements remained calm and deliberate. Years of working with alien young had taught her that they could sense fear. "All right, everyone," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Time for a special game. Nova, help me gather the little ones." Nova, now nearly full-grown but still a resident of the station, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The Craxie scales shifted to alert patterns as they began helping shepherd the younger ones toward the station's secure inner chambers. The threat they'd been dreading had finally arrived. A radical faction, calling themselves the Purists, had emerged from the darker corners of the galaxy. They viewed the interspecies cooperation at Horizon Station as an abomination, particularly the idea of humans raising warrior race children. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, the station's AI reported. Configurations match known Purist vessels. They're jamming long-range communications. In the secure chamber, Sarah and the other human caregivers worked to keep their charges calm. They had drilled for this, but reality was always different. The chamber, designed specifically for this purpose, was filled with young ones from a dozen different species, each with their own needs and fears. Dr. Chen, a young vexary crystal form, chimed anxiously, its facets flickering with worry light. I sense hostile intentions approaching. We're safe here, Sarah assured them, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. The station's defenses were substantial. The Craxi had made sure of that. But against a determined assault. The first impact rocked the station. Above the secure chambers, the battle began. Horizon's defensive systems engaged automatically, filling the space around the station with a web of energy barriers and countermeasures. But the Purists had planned well. Their first wave was just a distraction. While the station's outer defenses dealt with the obvious threat, smaller ships slipped through the chaos, seeking entry points. In the secure chamber, Nova suddenly tensed. There inside, the young Craxi growled, scales shifting to battle-ready patterns. I can smell them. Sarah touched her comm unit. Commander, we have intruders near the sanctuary chambers. What's the situation up there? Holding, Martins replied, the sound of weapons fire in the background. But they're pushing hard. These aren't just raiders. They're well-equipped and well-trained. The children were picking up on the tension now. Young Meridian floaters were pulsing with distress colors, while the Xenthian royal offspring had begun emitting their species' characteristic stress pheromones. Sarah knew they needed to act, not just hide. Nova, she said quietly, remember the emergency protocols we discussed. It's time. The young Craxi's eyes gleamed with understanding. Together with the other older youngsters who had grown up on the station, they began implementing a plan that had been prepared but never tested. Each species had unique abilities that, when properly coordinated, could do more than just hide. They could fight back. As the Purists breached the outer security doors, they expected to find helpless caretakers and scared children. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented. A coordinated defense that combined the natural abilities of multiple species, guided by human ingenuity and protected by the fierce determination of young Craxi warriors who had been raised to protect rather than just fight. The Vexry young created crystalline barriers that refracted energy weapons. Meridian floaters generated disorienting electromagnetic pulses, and the Xenthian royal offspring, typically pampered and protected, revealed why their species had survived countless wars. Their combined psychic abilities could confuse and disorient attackers. At the center of it all, Sarah and her human colleagues coordinated their charges with the precision of conductors leading an orchestra of chaos. They had trained for this, not just to hide, but to prove that their differences were their strength. The Purists had made a fatal miscalculation. They'd seen the Horizon Station as a soft target, a place of caregivers and children. What they found instead was a fortress defended by the most formidable force in the galaxy, a family protecting its own. High above in the station's command center, Commander Martinez watched in amazement as tactical displays showed the unexpected counterattack unfolding. Those clever bastards, she whispered, realizing what Sarah and her team had been quietly preparing for all these years. The secure chambers, designed to be the last line of defense, had become a trap for the attackers. Purist soldiers found themselves facing defenses that seemed to anticipate their every move. Young ones they'd dismissed as helpless charges were working in perfect concert, their natural abilities amplified by human coordination and planning. Commander, the tactical officer reported, we're getting signals from multiple vectors. Ships dropping out of FTL. It's the Craxi defense fleet. The Purists' jamming hadn't been as complete as they'd thought. Nova and the other older Craxi young had managed to send out a specific distress signal, one that traveled through frequencies only their species could detect. The response was overwhelming. Massive Craxi warships materialized around the station, their distinctive silhouettes striking fear into the attacking forces. But they weren't alone. Ships from other species whose young had found sanctuary at Horizon arrived as well. The Vexry crystal ships, Meridian stellar dancers, and even the rarely seen Xinthian royal fleet joined the defense. Inside the station, Sarah coordinated the final phase of their defense. "Nova," she called out, "now." The young Craxi, along with their peers, executed a maneuver they'd practiced in secret for months. Using their species' natural ability to generate electromagnetic fields, they created a synchronized pulse that disabled the purists' neural interfaces, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. 5 years after the Battle of Horizon Station, Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the newly constructed Galactic Care Academy. The massive structure, built in Earth's orbit, represented humanity's evolving role in the interstellar community. What had started as an emergency arrangement on a remote research station had bloomed into something revolutionary. Nova, now a full adult and decorated Craxi diplomat, stood beside her as they watched new human recruits file in for their first day of training. The Academy's halls were designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs, from the crystalline chambers for Vexry instructors to the gravity-variable sections for Meridian teachers. "Did you ever imagine this?" Nova asked, their scales shimmering with the deep blues of contentment. "When you first found me hiding behind my guardian, did you think it would lead to all this?" Sarah smiled, watching as a group of young human cadets received their first lessons in Xinthian empathy techniques from a royal instructor. "Honestly, I was just trying to help a scared child. Sometimes the biggest changes start from the smallest acts of kindness." The Academy had become more than just a training center for interspecies caregivers. It was a symbol of humanity's unique role in the galaxy. While other species excelled in technology, warfare, or commerce, humans had found their niche in something far more fundamental: the ability to bridge gaps between different species, to care for and protect those unlike themselves. The latest reports from the frontier colonies are impressive, Commander Martinez, now Admiral Martinez, said, joining them at the observation window. The presence of human caregivers has reduced interspecies conflicts by 70%. Turns out it's harder to fear or hate other species when they've helped raise your children. The Academy's success had led to unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. Species that had been historical enemies found common ground in human-run care centers. Young ones who grew up together under human guidance became bridges between their civilizations as adults. The purists did us a favor, in a way, Sarah reflected. Their attack proved that strength doesn't always come from weapons or technology. Sometimes it comes from understanding, from caring, from being willing to see past differences. The legacy of Horizon Station had spread far beyond its original mission. Human caregivers were now sought after throughout known space. They served on diplomatic missions, helped establish new colonies, and facilitated cultural exchange programs. The galaxy had discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their ability to fight or build, but in their capacity to nurture and protect. As they watched the training sessions below, a group of new Craxi youngsters arrived for their cultural exchange program. Their scales flickered with excitement as they met their human mentors for the first time. The scene was a far cry from the fear and uncertainty of those first days with Nova. "You know what the best part is," Nova said, their voice carrying the wisdom of one who had lived this transformation. "Every child who grows up in these programs learns that strength and care aren't opposites. They're the same thing." Sarah nodded, remembering that scared young Craxi from years ago. "The galaxy's a big place," she said, "full of differences that can seem impossible to bridge. But sometimes all it takes is one person willing to reach out, to care, to protect. The rest follows naturally." As the day drew to a close, Sarah made her way through the Academy's halls, passing training rooms where humans learned the specific needs of dozens of species, laboratories where new care techniques were developed, and common areas where beings from across the galaxy shared stories and experiences. The Horizon Station still operated, now as a historical site and active care center. But its legacy had grown far beyond those early days. Humanity had found its place among the stars not by conquering or competing, but by caring and protecting. In doing so, they had helped create a galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than feared, where strength was measured not in firepower, but in the ability to nurture and understand. And it had all started with one human willing to see past the fearsome appearance of a young Craxy, to offer help when others would have turned away. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most powerful forces in the universe aren't the ones that destroy or dominate, but the ones that protect and nurture. In finding their role as galactic caretakers, humanity had finally discovered its true destiny among the stars.